Hello, welcome to another edition of the Corner 3 here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. As always, I'm your host, Cale Berger, and we've made it. It's the end of the 2019 NBA season, and the Toronto Raptors have been crowned 2019 NBA champions, beating the Golden State Warriors in 6 games last night in Oracle Arena. The final game in Oracle, unfortunately for the Warriors, they end their tenure there in Oakland with a loss, losing in their 5th consecutive NBA Finals, whereas the Raptors win their first in franchise history. It seems like the trade to get Kawhi Leonard to Toronto has paid off in an incredible way, in the best way possible for Masai Ujiri and that front office of the Raptors. They get their first NBA title in franchise history, and Kawhi wins the Finals MVP, his second. He's one of only 3 players now who have won 2 Finals MVPs with 2 different teams. The other 2, LeBron with the Cavs and the Heat, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So some great company there for Kawhi Leonard. But on today's episode of the Corner 3, we're going to talk about this final series, how the Raptors won it. We're going to talk about maybe if a lot of people are arguing if this championship deserves kind of an asterisk because of the injuries suffered by Golden State. We're going to talk about those injuries Golden State suffered to Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant over the last few games here. We're going to talk about if the Warriors dynasty is coming to a close here with this loss in the finals. Like I said, their 5th consecutive trip to the finals. And we're going to do a little preview of what I think will happen this summer, how these injuries to those 2 key guys in KD and Klay will affect free agency, will affect the Warriors going forward, and maybe look into the crystal ball a little bit to see what decisions those guys might make, and also what decision Kawhi Leonard might make when free agency rolls around in just a few weeks from now. It's right around the corner at the end of the month here. I believe it's June 26th is when free agency starts, so it'll certainly be an exciting next few weeks here with the draft coming up soon and free agency as well. The drama and the fun does not stop in the NBA, even though the season is over. But first things first, how did the Raptors do it? They got here from some heroics throughout the playoffs from Kawhi Leonard. They knocked off the Magic, the Sixers, the Bucks, and now they knock off the Golden State Warriors, this Warriors dynasty who, with the big 3 they had, the big 4, adding Boogie, still Iggy coming off the bench, they look to be better than they've ever been before. But obviously some of those key injuries and a great game plan put together by Nick Nurse and executed incredibly well by those Raptors players allowed the Raptors to win this series. And I'm not going to sit here and say that they didn't benefit from some of those injuries, because obviously they do. And we'll get to that in a little bit in our next segment, my next question to address here. But I'm not going to say that they didn't benefit from some of the injuries suffered by Golden State, but there's never been a team, I think, in NBA history that hasn't benefited from an injury or something off the court or some other issue that was not related to actual basketball that benefited a team to win a title. So we'll get to that a little later. But first, how did the Raptors do it? I think the first thing is they had the best player on the floor the entire series. And we can debate all day of who is the best player in the league, if it's LeBron still, if it's Kevin Durant at healthy, if it's Kawhi. In this series, it was Kawhi Leonard. And I think the biggest thing about Kawhi is we know he's a great defender. We know he's now become one of the best offensive players in the league. I mean, he was deadly from the mid-range. He was fearless. He was aggressive at times, but also understood, I think, better than he's ever done in his career, and understood a lot more than a lot of other guys in the league. He did a great job of picking his spots in this series. And you saw that in game 6. You saw that in game 1. In game 1, it was more of him struggling with his shot. But in game 6, he only scored 22 points, but they were an impactful 22 points. He had the 30-point games. He had the big-time defensive stops. He made plays for his teammates. Kawhi had an all-around series, similar to the likes of what we've seen from maybe LeBron over the last few years, where LeBron has impacted the game in so many different ways. But Kawhi's done an incredible job of just picking his spots and understanding when to be aggressive, when to be passive, when to let his teammates take over. And that's what he did in Game 6. And that's, I think, partially what allowed the Raptors to win this series, is that he took the back seat for a little bit of this game and allowed guys like Kyle Lowry, who's having a great shooting night, Marc Gasol, Siakam, Fred VanVleet. He allowed those supporting players. He had trust in them, he had faith in them, and he allowed them to take over at points of this game. And I think that's the big reason why they were able to close this thing out in 6 at Oracle. The other thing, too, is there was a great defensive scheme put together by Nick Nurse. I mean, the way that they kept running players at Steph Curry, Fred VanVleet. I know everyone's clowning Hubie Brown, who was the lone media member that didn't name Kawhi Leonard Finals MVP, would have made him a unanimous Finals MVP. But he voted for Fred VanVleet to be the most valuable player in these NBA Finals. And some might laugh at that because of VanVleet is a sixth man and his stature and whatever else it is, a guy out of Wichita State. It doesn't matter. The guy was incredibly impactful in this series, not only scoring the basketball, but he really did a phenomenal job on Steph Curry. And Steph Curry did have games where he scored 30, where he knocked down 3-point shots, where he had that 40-point game, I believe, in Game 4, when Klay and KD were hurt, and it was really just him left to do the scoring. But I think what we saw as the series went on is Steph Curry was worn down. And part of that was because he had to constantly run away and try to do everything he could to break free of Fred VanVleet, and VanVleet wouldn't have it. He was not letting Steph Curry get an inch of separation in this entire series, and credit to him, I think that was a big factor in why Steph maybe didn't play as well as he could, and another reason why we saw another lackluster finals performance from Steph Curry, because of the defensive intensity of Fred VanVleet. But not only VanVleet, when Lowry was in there, he was trying his best. He might not be as quick as he used to be, but he's still a solid defender. He's still like a pit bull out there. When they switched players onto Curry, when they switched on screens, on dribble handoffs, Siakam did a good job switching on him. So the scheme they set up for Steph Curry, I think, was well executed, well designed, and I think it worked to perfection in this series. Even though he put up some numbers in spurts and in certain games, overall, I think they did what they tried to do against Steph, and they did it to perfection. I think the other thing, too, that you have to point out here, and this is something that I definitely highlighted, I think, going into this season, and also something I highlighted going into this playoff run, is that Golden State sacrificed their depth to get Kevin Durant and Boogie Cousins over the last few years here, and that this Warriors team was not nearly as deep as they've been over this 5-6 year run. And sure enough, depth is something that came back to haunt them, and depth is something that bit them in the butt, because what did I say before the playoffs started? The Warriors could not afford a key injury to one of their players. They could not afford a key injury to anyone, really, or they were going to have an issue, and there were going to be areas where teams could exploit them. Well, they were able to survive not having Boogie for most of the playoffs and not having Durant for the Western Conference Finals and most of this final series. But still, when you went to the guys coming off the bench, the only guy that really had a key impact, I would say Looney, but Looney also dealt with injury, and Quinn Cook. And outside of that, I mean, Iguodala was obviously in the starting lineup, but they had no one else to step up in that second unit. And that was really, I think, one of the biggest keys of this series is, like I said, the job Masai Ujiri did assembling this Raptors roster is that bench was phenomenal. And they might have not gone deep in that bench. They might have only played a rotation of maybe, 8 guys in total on their team, maybe 9 at times. But, VanVleet was phenomenal. Ibaka, I think, was probably the X factor in this series. I mean, Serge Ibaka, I think it's overlooked a lot for how quality of a player he is, but maybe it's just he had to be in the right situation. He's bounced around a little bit since leaving Oklahoma City when he was traded to the Magic, and he found a home in Toronto where, I mean, it was blocking shots, it was offensive rebounds, it was scoring the basketball. Ibaka was all over the place in that second unit, and Golden State really didn't have an answer for him. And I think part of that might be that, Boogie has a slow step. He's not the player he used to be. He clearly cannot move as well as he once did. And I don't know if that's a combination of the Achilles and the quad or individually. I'm not sure what it is, but he clearly cannot move the way he used to, and he was getting exposed by Gasol, by Ibaka, no matter who it was. So I think Serge Ibaka was clearly one of the X factors in the series. You also had Norman Powell. I mean, whoever came off the bench for them was doing a great job, giving quality minutes, scoring the basketball, defending, And that really, I think, was one of the biggest differences in the series. I also alluded to DeMarcus Cousins. Marc Gasol was, that addition of Marc Gasol at the trade deadline was another phenomenal move by the Raptors front office and Masai Ujiri. Because is he a guy maybe on the decline in his career? Yes, obviously. He's over 30 years old. He's probably, 34, 35 years old. I mean, he's been a phenomenal player, but he's not the player he used to be that was winning Defensive Player of the Year awards. But Marc Gasol, I think, is one of the most vocal, intelligent players in the entire league. And really, it's intelligence, the way he communicates on defense, his knowledge of the game, his experience. And then that translates to offense as well, how crafty he is, how polished his post game is. I think Marc Gasol was the perfect addition to this Raptors team, and another slam dunk move by them that paid dividends in winning an NBA title. The Warriors also had no answer for Marc Gasol. DeMarcus Cousins could not defend him. He was way too big for Draymond Green, who does not seem to be the defender he was at all 3 years ago when he was, a Defensive Player of the Year type of player. Marc Gasol was another guy, and it was honestly the bigs of Toronto that really were one of the biggest impacts on this series because Golden State did not have an answer for them. But I want to touch on the fact that some people are saying that this championship deserves an asterisk for the Toronto because they weren't playing a Golden State team at full strength. And here's what I'll say to those people. Was it beneficial to the Raptors that some of the Warriors' key players were hurt? Yes, obviously. It is going to be easier to win if you do not have to play Kevin Durant. That's common sense. Let's not be idiots here. But to say that Golden State hasn't benefited from injuries on this entire run, and to say that all teams, all dynasties, just teams that have won titles in general, have not benefited from some hardship or mishap happening to an opponent down the line is naive. It's naive and it's hypocritical and it's frankly uninformed. And I'm not going to say that Golden State's been lucky, because I don't believe that injuries are lucky or anything, because you still have to execute. You still have to play great basketball. You still have to play your game. You have to execute your game plan, and you have to win, and that's what Toronto did. You got to play whoever's on the court. You can't control if someone on the other team gets hurt or if they're going to play or not. All you can do is execute your game plan and win. That's all you can do, is beat the guys that are on the court placed in front of you, and that's what Toronto did, and give them credit for that. But to say that this was luck by them or this isn't a real championship is disrespectful, and it's stupid. Because you look at Golden State over this 5-year run or so. When they won that first title in 2015, Kevin Durant, who was still an Oklahoma City Thunder player at that time, was out for the playoffs and the year because he had a foot injury, and Golden State didn't have to play him in the playoffs. Later on in this run, actually that same year, they played the Cavaliers in the NBA Finals, and LeBron James is playing with a lineup of Matthew Dellavedova, Tristan Thompson, like Iman Shumpert or J.R. Smith, and Timothy Mozgov. Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving both hurt in that series, and it still went to 6 games. But the Warriors, no one gives, I guess, an asterisk to that championship because they didn't play Kyrie and Kevin Love on the Cavaliers. Fast forward a little more. Kawhi Leonard, still a member of the Spurs, was absolutely dogging the Golden State Warriors before he was taken out of the game on a dirty play by Zaza Pachulia, who started this whole issue that transpired and this whole saga and storyline that, interesting enough, allows Kawhi to wound up in Toronto and end up beating them in the 2019 finals. But to say that Golden State hasn't dealt with injuries along the way is naive. To say that anyone hasn't is hypocritical and naive. But I think it's disrespectful, and I think it's stupid, and it's revisionist to say that this championship for Toronto deserves an asterisk because they didn't have to play Durant, or Clay got hurt, or Looney got hurt, or Boogie was hurt at the time. I don't care. You got to play with who you have. You got to play against who the other team is going to put on the floor, and that's what Toronto did, and they ended up winning the series. So, frankly, I'm not going to buy that argument. I'm not going to give it any more thought. I'm not going to address it anymore because it's stupid, and I think we need to appreciate what Toronto did because they played a hell of a series. Now, is this Warriors dynasty over? Yesterday before the game, I would have told you no. Klay Thompson resigns for the max contract. They let KD walk. They get some more depth on this team. They get some quality role players. And all of a sudden, it's back to that 73-9 Warriors team that was the start of this dynasty, was in the heart and the thick of this dynasty, and everything's fine. And they're still a force to contend with in the Western Conference and in the NBA overall. But you see Klay Thompson go down with a torn ACL in last night's Game 6. And by the way, let me say, credit to Klay, his toughness, the type of player he is, one of my favorite players in the entire league, and the fact that he tore his ACL, was down, got carried back in the locker room, ran a little bit in the hallway, walked back out, hit the free throws, and exited the game, only to leave the arena on crutches, leaving Oracle Arena for the last time on crutches with a torn ACL. That's toughness right there. That's a guy who wants to win, a guy who is going to give it all out there for you. And I think that can't be lost on the Warriors and can't be lost on their organization. They need to offer Klay Thompson the max contract regardless. But after that, Klay's not going to be back until March of next year, at least. Maybe February if the Warriors are lucky with that torn ACL, because I think he's going to resign. I see people saying, oh, he's going to go to the Lakers. Klay Thompson's going to be a Warrior. I mean, that's where he belongs. I think that's where he wants to be, and that's where they want to make sure they do everything in their power to keep him. But to say that if this dynasty is over, I mean, the Warriors can get in a real hole next year if it's just Steph Curry and Draymond Green. I mean, they could obviously go out and sign someone else or sign some quality role players, which they probably should do to replenish some of this depth issues they've been having. But Klay Thompson being out for more than half the season is, I think, really going to be an issue for them. I'm not sure it would be an issue going forward. I think Klay will be fine. You know, modern medicine, guys tear their ACL all the time. Guys come back fine in every sport, really. I don't think that's big of an issue for Klay, but it's going to be a long road for him. But I think Klay is going to attack it with the way he attacks everything else. But still, I think that's a major blow to the Warriors in terms of, you know, keeping this run going, this dynasty, because you're going to lose him for more than half the season. Steph's going to be another year older, trying to carry this team. He's going to be still working things back by the time that he's playing again and by the time the playoffs start. It's going to be tough for the Warriors. But I still think, though, that once he's back healthy, if they get those quality role players, if they add other talent on this team, I think that the Warriors can still be a force to be reckoned with for the next 3 or 4 years. Because if we're being honest, Steph's game is not going anywhere. He might lose a step, but you don't lose shooting. Now, Draymond might be taking a step back here because he's already started to do that over the last 2 years, but they can go out and get somebody that can give them more help. They can get more scoring. Klay, I think he'll be fine after the ACL injury, and I think he'll be all right because his game is pretty much reliant on shooting as well. The other thing, too, is this team plays defense, and defense really doesn't slip that much either. If they get the right players, to fit that system. They still have Steve Kerr, one of the best coaches in the league. I don't see any reason why the Warriors, I guess that's not the way to put it. I think the Warriors can still be a team that is one of the best in the NBA going forward, but it's certainly going to be more difficult for them. But I'm also not counting them out because I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt that they can figure this thing out in terms of gaining talent, acquiring players, and I have some faith in this system as well that has brought them to 5 straight NBA Finals appearances. Now, how do the Durant and Klay injuries affect the Warriors going forward and free agency this summer? Durant, obviously, a torn Achilles. And I'm seeing these takes of people saying that, oh, he's going to opt into his contract with the Warriors for the $31 million and just rehab next year instead of signing a long-term contract elsewhere. I think that's the last possible scenario for Durant. Number one, teams are still going to want to take him with a max contract and pay him the $38 million around that he can make, even with this torn Achilles, because I think that he will take a step back because every guy that's had an Achilles injury is not the same player they were before it. That's a proven fact. You've seen it time and time again. Whether it's been Rudy Gay, Wesley Matthews, Kobe Bryant, DeMarcus Cousins, pretty much everybody. Mike Conley as well with a ruptured Achilles. But he's still a guy who's 6'11", who can shoot over anybody as an unblockable turnaround. I mean, that's still a guy who's going to give you 20 points a night, if not more, even if he's not able to get by guys as well as he has been his entire career. But I think the Nets, I think the Lakers, I think the Knicks, I think a plethora of teams are still going to offer KD the max, even if they won't have him for 1 year, because of what they still think he could provide them when he comes back from that injury. If I'm Durant, I'm going out to get paid. I think the other thing here that needs to be addressed is I'm not sure how much Kevin Durant trusts this Warriors medical staff and front office. Because if we're being honest, and I think that Jalen Rose from ESPN made a really good point about this when Durant initially got hurt in Game 5, is that there's a few things to blame here. I think one of them is the Warriors front office and medical staff, that they didn't put to rest these reports of that other players in the Warriors locker room on the roster were upset with and encouraging Durant to play because they thought he was healthy. They didn't shut those down. They didn't shut down the reports of this team being better without Durant, because we all know that's clearly not true, because they just lost the NBA Finals. They probably would have won if Durant was fully healthy. And the other thing Jalen Rose said is that the player's always going to want to play. The player's always going to want to push it and give it his best and try to go out there for his team and play. I credit Kevin Durant for being committed to his team, for trying to gut it out. I also fault Kevin Durant for, kind of being short-sighted and maybe a little reckless in trying to go out there when he clearly was not healthy. I also think the Warriors medical staff is to blame, because in that situation, the player's always going to want to play and put himself in harm's way for the betterment of the team. And for better or worse, that's usually what's going to happen with a player that loves the game and loves to compete. But as a coaching staff, as a front office, as a medical staff, you need to be the ones to sit him down and say, no, you are not playing. You are not putting yourself in further danger. You are not going to harm yourself in the future for playing right now. They needed to sit him down and tell him he was not going to play. But they got greedy. They realized they were down 3-1, and they decided, all right, we need to do whatever we can to get KD back out here. And sure enough, he clearly was not healthy. I don't think it was a calf injury all along. I think it was always something with the Achilles. But you saw the way he stepped and the way that calf muscle jiggled. The muscle shoots up into the upper part of the leg from the Achilles, and that's exactly what you saw in the replay. And now Durant is going to be out for a year. He's going to miss all of next season with a ruptured Achilles. And you also saw that, I believe his mother posted something on Instagram of, not kind of a cryptic message about not trusting the Warriors or something like that, or that medical staff or something along those lines. Durant's not coming back. He wasn't coming back regardless, but he's especially not opting in for $30 million to be with that medical staff that just put him in harm's way and got him hurt worse, to make $30 million when he can make $38 million going elsewhere. I mean, that's basically the gist of it. He's gone. Now, Clay, I think the Warriors are going to re-sign him long-term. They're going to offer him the Supermax contract because he deserves it. And the ACL injury, as much as the ACL injury is such a negative connotation in our culture, in sports, in America and in the world, an ACL injury is not as bad as it was 20 years ago. Modern medicine, guys are coming back quicker than ever. Guys are coming back the same player they were prior to the injury. So I'm really not that worried about Clay as much as I am about KD not being the same player long term. I think the Warriors should still offer him that Supermax contract and keep this core together and just try to add some more talent around them, because I think this is what got everything started for the Warriors. But in terms of free agency, this affects the plans of a lot of guys. It affects the plans of Kyrie Irving for sure. Kyrie was a guy that was likely going to team up with Kevin Durant, but now he's full on going to the Nets, it seems like. I mean, they cleared the cap space. He switched agents. All signs are pointing to Kyrie becoming a Brooklyn Net. Could the Nets still sign Kevin Durant to pair with Kyrie Irving? Absolutely. But, some teams might be a little more apprehensive to sign Durant, or players might be more apprehensive to team up with Durant if they realize they're going to have to play without him and gut it out for a year on what would likely be a bad team. Paying $38 million to a guy to not play, that kind of handcuffs you a little bit on who you can sign and who you can bring in as a supporting cast. But that's what I think that Kevin Durant will sign a long-term contract elsewhere. I think Klay will re-sign with the Warriors. That now leaves us to what will happen with Kawhi. Coming off his second NBA title, coming off his second Finals MVP, and he's going to be a free agent. He doesn't have a player option, but why would he opt in to make $20 million when he can get paid like one of the highest paid players in the entire league? I think if I'm Kawhi Leonard, I think there's two options. You're either re-signing with the Raptors to keep this thing going, or you're signing with the Los Angeles Clippers. I've talked about the Clippers before on this show. The Clippers have room for 2 max spots. They're a team that already took the Warriors to, I believe, it was 6 or 7 games in the first round of these playoffs with no real star, with Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, and Montrezl Harrell, and they pushed the Warriors to the brink in the first round. So that's a good team already, that if you add 2 stars to that, I mean, the Clippers are automatically a contender, automatically maybe the best team in the West if you add Kawhi Leonard and another superstar to that mix. But I don't think I'm banking more on Kawhi wanting to stay in Toronto. I think Kawhi was never about him wanting to be in Toronto, in LA. It was never about him wanting to be in a big market in New York and Miami and Los Angeles. It was about Toronto. It was about Kawhi being in a place like Toronto where he wanted to be, where he was appreciated, and where he could win championships. And they just proved to you last night that he can win titles in Toronto. So if that's Kawhi Leonard's ultimate goal, which he's a robot, I mean, what else does he care about? He eats, sleeps, drinks, and he wins titles. I mean, it's literally and ends dynasties, because he's now ended 3 dynasties in the Heat, the Spurs, and I'm not saying he's officially ended the Warriors, but that is the running joke on Twitter, which I find very funny. Kawhi's seen now that he can win in Toronto. They have a great supporting cast around him. They'll have to make some deals to keep this core together, to continue to acquire supporting talent for him. But I think he likes Toronto. It was never about him being in a big market. That's not Kawhi's mentality. That's not his personality, that I need to be in the bright spotlight. The guy hates talking to the media. The guy hates talking regardless. He'd rather not speak if possible. So why would he want to be in a city with bright lights and stars and celebrities? It's incredible that all he wants to do is ball. And some people, that bothers them. I think it's incredible about Kawhi. It's what makes Kawhi Kawhi and what makes him great. So I think the most likely scenario is Kawhi Leonard re-signs in Toronto, and they try to make a deal or get more talent there around him to keep this thing going and maybe make a dynasty in Toronto. But that's what I think will happen. The people that say he's going to go to the Lakers, I think, are out of their mind. This guy is probably one of the best is the top 3 player in the league right now, if not the best player in the league right now at this very moment. Why in the hell would he go to LA to play second fiddle to LeBron? I know he might be, the number one option with LeBron as LeBron starts to decline in his career, but he's proven he can win on his own. Why would he want to go to a place where LeBron is clearly going to be in the spotlight? It's going to be LeBron's team. LeBron's going to be making the decisions. Guys don't want to team up with LeBron the way they wanted to 3-4 years ago. Guys want to win it on their own. Guys want to be their own team and play with their own friends. And guys want to be their own man and not be LeBron's sidekick. And if you're Kawhi Leonard, and honestly, if you're Anthony Davis too, I don't understand the Anthony Davis adoration with playing with LeBron, because if Anthony Davis is that great, he should try to play on a team of his own where he can win a title, but that's beside the point. We'll talk about that another day here in the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live. If I'm Kawhi, I'm not going to play with LeBron. If I'm Kawhi, I'm going to stay in Toronto or go to the Clippers and team up with another superstar who can be my Robin to my Batman and keep winning titles, because he's already won 2 and the guy's under 30 years old. He's got a lot of years left to play and a lot of titles to win when he's this good already at this age. But That's going to do it for another edition of the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live. As always, subscribe on YouTube. Helps us out a lot. Lets us keep this thing rolling here, giving out more videos for you guys. And follow us on Twitter at Pittsburgh Sports Live as well for our latest videos, latest content, whether it's Steelers, Pirates, Pitt, the Corner 3, hockey, whatever it is, here in the Pittsburgh Sports Now family of networks. And as always, follow me on Twitter as well at Cale_Berger. It's going to be a really fun month of June and a really fun NBA summer. We'll have the draft. We'll have free agency. It's going to be a wild one. This could be one of the most interesting and chaotic free agency periods we've ever seen in the NBA. So it should be a lot of fun. But as always, I'm your host, Cale Berger. It's the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live. See you soon.